Hello everybody. I have a new update to make on the samples received from CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, as results of foods they tested for presence of glyphosate and its metabolite AMPA, which is also just as nasty. So the previous update was when I had transcribed about 100 samples, and today I have finished 200 of them out of 7,000, so there's still a long way to go. But I have some observations, and I don't know when I'll finish all 7,000, so I want to keep you updating with whatever I have up to now. So here is this 200th reading, which is from Atlantic Canada, and here is the first reading, frozen French fries from Quebec, Canada. And I want to explain what these are and what my analysis is and what it means, and so far what I've decided about this reading with regard to my own eating habit. And those who want to follow similar logic can look this up, or they can go to my blog, where this link will be there, where you can click and go to this website where this searchable database, the searchable PDF file is presented, and you can download it and you can check line by line everything and make your own decisions accordingly. So what is this data about? First of all, the leftmost column, this column, I did not it did not come from CFIA. I added it just to put a serial number on each line of sample data. Next, this column, I did not this did not come on the leftmost. It was on the rightmost of the drawn samples, which gave the full explanation of what it is. That is frozen French fries from Quebec. So this frozen French fries was the rightmost column. I dragged it to the leftmost. I hid some of the repetitive columns to make it manageable, and I did not change any data. However, I did make one exception. The readings of glyphosate were provided. They were in micrograms per gram, or part per million, you can say, and I multiplied it by 1,000 times, created another column next to it for ppb, parts per billion, and wrote the same figures down. So 0.0098 as microgram per gram is same as 9.8 parts per billion. So this is how I added one column, just to use that reading for later analysis. And then the last column is the program assessment for FDR. I don't know what it means, but basically it tells CFIR's decision after reading the data. For instance, not assessed anymore. No violation when there was 49.2 micrograms found in organic wheat grain buckwheat flour. For some reason, it is considered not a violation. Or when long grain brown rice, item number 2, was found to have 9.8 parts per billion glyphosate, it was not a violation. This will follow up with more questions by me under Freedom of Access to Information Act, asking them to give me the limits of what those violating the ranges are where it is not under violation. One example is here, dry black beans. You can see that it has got 639 parts per billion, very high, and still no violation. The other thing is about this second column, sample type. Anything that has the word organic in it comes up in green, so that you can cross-check the organic, and you can see the first organic sample described as organic whole grain buckwheat flour, item number 6, also has measurable amount of glyphosate, which is 49.2 parts per billion, and it's not in violation. So a lot of the organic foods do have glyphosate measured, for sure, and some of the non-organic food have no glyphosate. So coming back to this other column about amount and ppm, you can see that the entire column has colors on it, highlighted colors. Anything that shows negative, that means no glyphosate found, is highlighted at green. In other words, it's as far as glyphosate and AMPA is concerned, this item is as good as organic. There might be other things in it, but this table and this analysis is only about glyphosate. So the green ones on this column means this item has no glyphosate, no measurable amount of glyphosate found. Then the red ones have got two kinds. One is where the readings are available, such as this one, 0.0098 or 9.8 parts per billion, or when the result was positive in the glyphosate screening, no amount was measured, or probably not measurable, just trace. I don't know, but it was screened and found positive and not assessed any further than that, and that is also in red. So in red you have the ones that are actually showing some amount of glyphosate that is present, and the others that are just showing that it shows positive on glyphosate without any amount. Both are red. So as you go down, you'll see there are more reds than there are greens, which means to say more foods tested had glyphosate in them as compared to those that did not. The other thing that one can find out from this, of course, is individually what kind of food and then what was the concentration. So therefore one can make a decision on what to eat, what not to eat. It's important to remember that not all organics are without glyphosate, and not all non-organics or not described as organics do have glyphosate. So this is one. And then as far as the rightmost column, not assessed or not in violation, there is only one sample in the whole lot here which actually was found in violation. This is chickpeas, in bracket garbanzo beans, drawn in the Atlantic area, probably in the East Coast, of origin written as unknown. I suspect it is grown in North America, but it says origin unknown. It was found to have AMPA of 17.3 parts per billion, and glyphosate itself has 1,420 parts per billion. Altogether 1,437.3 parts per billion AMPA and glyphosate, and it is considered to be in violation. So apparently chickpeas has a level that is beyond their minimum considered safe limit. So it is shown in violation. I intend to find out what are these safe limits and if it is standard for all or different for different. And nonetheless, I do not like glyphosate, even a little bit of it. So I have done my own sets of analysis after transcribing all this data. You can see the last item, small white bean from Atlantic coast, grown in Canada, has got 1,280 parts per billion glyphosate, and it is still not in violation. So what are the limits for each is something that I will be looking for. And now I take you to the next sheet, which is derived from this sheet and then analyzed, and I will explain it to you. Here is the next sheet, and here it shows total sample. Canada, the first column. It has got total 44 samples. Out of which these 44, 16 showed presence of glyphosate or AMPA. Another 13 showed positive in the screening, though amount is not known. So the total amount of samples that had some toxicity in it were 29 out of 44. And then the two percentages, 36% represents the amount of represents 16 out of 44, or the amount of samples that had measured amount of glyphosate mentioned, and then the next one, 66%, is 29 out of 44, which means the total amount of total percentages of sample that had some amount of glyphosate, even if it was not all measured. And then adding up all that glyphosate and AMPA and divided it by the total number of samples, which is 44, gives the average glyphosate and AMPA parts per billion quantity for Canadian foods as 150.68, way above any other country. So just looking at this data of the first 200 samples, one would say Canadian food is an order of dimension more contaminated with glyphosate than food from anywhere else. The same figure for USA is 50.67 or 1/3 of the Canadian value. However, there is some confusion in my mind, and that is the total number of samples taken by CFIA of foods in Canada seems to be only 44, where 53 of them are imported food from USA and 69 of them are declared as unknown. That means foods that were picked up in Canada but whose origin were not known, maybe just picked up from the store, which didn't say where it was from. So I suspect that taking foods from within Canada, the maximum number of samples should be from Canada, and then lesser number of samples should be from as imported from somewhere else. So likely, I'm just guessing, that a large portion of this unknown origin samples are actually Canadian. And that might be a fair guess, but it is still a guess. So if I add up the unknowns and Canada together, then the total number of samples become 113 as compared to 53 of United States. This seems to be logical to me that we should have twice as many foods originating in Canada if you are taking samples from Canada. And then its percentages change. Amount of toxic percentage is 78. Amount of number of samples out of this 113 that have some toxicity is 78. The percentage that has AMPA and glyphosate is 34, and the percentage that has some glyphosate in it is 69, and the average parts per billion figure comes down from 150 to 99, which is still about twice as much as United States. This is a very telling for how much of our food system is contaminated, and this technology, although it was invented in the US and then pushed everywhere, how much Canada has gone in adopting it and doing it, overdoing it, and doing it even probably more than Americans have done themselves. So in case the samples are all mixed up and there is not too easy to distinguish food from Canada and USA for following very similar practices, then we can club all of them together, Canada, USA, and unknown, and then it will be 166 samples, out of which 36% have known amount, 68% have some amount of glyphosate, and its average figures would be 83.63 parts per billion. The only other country in North America that come under the same continent is Mexico, with only small sample of four samples only, and its results are 0. Then comes the next group from Asia, and there you have a smattering of few samples: China, Hong Kong, India, Japan, and Thailand. And interestingly enough, none of them have any glyphosate at all, so they're 0. And then comes South America with Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, and Peru. And Chile and Peru shows some trace amount of glyphosate, but no measurable amount, and for all countries the measurable amount in South America remains 0. Then comes some countries in Europe, that is Greece and Italy and Moldova and Serbia and Spain. Apparently these 5 countries had imported foods that were tested by CFIA, and their readings are also all 0. Then comes samples from the Middle East, Lebanon and Israel, and Lebanese food, 1 sample each, and Lebanese food had some trace amount of glyphosate but no measurable amount. And Israel, which had an orange, I think Jaffa orange, tested, and no glyphosate. Then comes the region in Africa, Ghana and South Africa. Ghana had 1 sample, no glyphosate. South Africa had 2 samples, one of them had trace amount, other one had no glyphosate, and the final result of amount in ppb is still 0. So all regions excepting North America, the final measurable amount is 0, and North America it is almost 100 or 150 depending on which reading you follow. Then comes the last bit, Total samples, you can see it's 200. And if you take all the glyphosate and AMPA readings and add them up and divide by 200, the world average is 69.41, quite a lot. And then comes the separation of only organic food. The figure for that is 4.19 parts per billion, or 0.00419 parts per million, or microgram per gram. So the organic food sample is not free of glyphosate, but it is very low compared to everything else. Then if you separate the organic and keep all the other samples as non-organic, then and the 47 samples were organic, so the remaining 153 are non-organic, and the average glyphosate content in parts per billion would be 89.49, or almost 90. So non-organic foods average is more than world average, and also more than, let's say, the combined Canadian, US, and unknown averages. That's partly because I think North America contributes heavily to this average, So the non-organic average is high, organic average is very low, and then certain kinds of food, I have not completed this list yet, but certain kinds of food, that is a kamut, I don't know how you pronounce it, it's some sort of a wild wheat that originated probably in Persia. I think it is being grown various places. I have not seen the mention of it elsewhere, but in the sample test it comes up repeatedly. So I wanted to find out what the hell it is, and there are 7 samples of it, and it seems to show very low amount of glyphosate, even better than the organic general average. That is, kamut is 3.63 parts per billion, and then comes rice, and rice is also reasonably low so far. It shows 9.8 parts per billion, or 0.0098 parts per million, and this one includes some that have got some trace amount, and only one sample that shows a small amount of actually measurable amount of glyphosate. All the rest were kind of trace amount, and many of them had no glyphosate at all. So that's rice, and average is still pretty low. Then comes soy, and I was expecting very high figures, but I think that will show up when more soy products are tested. But with 13 samples, the average glyphosate content is 10.33, and then goes up millet. You would think that millets are good. Yeah, they are good in other ways, but the glyphosate content of average, everything that was described as millet, is 10.53. Then comes the last of the normal ones, green pea. There are more, and I will analyze them more, but up to now, this is what I have. Green pea, and it has 11.14 parts per billion. Then comes the complicated ones and really difficult ones for me. The most puzzling, perhaps, out of this, or one of the most puzzling, has been wheat. And why do I call it puzzling, and why is it colored this way? It's because all the wheat samples so far tested in the first 200 samples of this report, all 9 of them are organic wheat, described as organic wheat flour, organic buckwheat, something or the other with the word wheat in it and organic in it. All 9 of them. And in spite of that, 8 out of 9 of them have either measurable or trace amounts of glyphosate, and pretty high quantity, that too. Only 1 out of the 9 organic wheat samples actually had no glyphosate. So if you add up all of them and divide it by this 9, the average comes to 20.73, higher than all this kamut and rice and soy and millet and green pea, none of which were organic. But the wheat, although organic, is higher than all these others. And this got me puzzled. That's why I put the left side as green. Green means organic, actually. And the red means too much glyphosate. And although the samples were all organic, the readings were too high. And I suspect, I don't know yet, is the reason for this is because so heavily, this non-organic wheat has been desiccated by glyphosate so heavily that it has thoroughly contaminated all of the wheat market, including the organic ones, and glyphosate is beginning to infiltrate into the organic matter, and that is why it is showing so high. In fact, because they are organic, this figure also influences why the whole organic average is 4.19. So if I was to remove the wheat from the organic and calculate what the rest of the organic crops figures are, it will probably be much less than 4.19, and I will do that and show you that organic food minus the wheat, this is what the figure is. So this is why wheat has become a problem for me, and I'm now contemplating whether even buying organic bread, which I do, is to be continued, or I have to look for alternative to my cereal taking. And there are alternatives. Then comes some of the most bizarre readings. Gluten-free. There are lots of good gluten-free items, 19 of them, much more than wheat, that had the word gluten-free in them. Some of them were organic, in fact, and they had almost no glyphosate, but the rest of them had so much glyphosate that the average is astronomical. I mean, comparatively, is 136 parts per billion per sample of per sample of gluten-free food. And this tells me that if you are gluten intolerant, maybe you need to eat gluten-free, otherwise it hurts you or something. But those who are eating gluten-free as a health issue, or as you know, being health conscious, but otherwise they are not intolerant of gluten, you might be subjecting yourself to a slow poisoning. At least I don't have any problem with gluten intolerance or something. I don't buy food that are gluten-free. I don't believe in gluten-free because I know how it came about, and your gut bacteria are damaged and you can't tolerate gluten and all that. So I don't. But now that I see this figure, I will be avoiding anything that says gluten-free like it is the plague, unless it is organic, in which case it will be good, not because it is gluten-free, but because it is organic. Then comes this last two of them, the very worst of the samples, chickpea and lentil. Now, chickpea, there are chickpeas that are coming from Asia and other places that are absolutely, clean and glyphosate free. But most of the chickpeas that are grown in North America, I don't know why, but I suspect, and I heard from some people that they are mass produced in industrial size operations, and they are desiccated probably with glyphosate. So they have 343.58 parts per billion glyphosate in average samples of chickpea. This has put me off chickpea after reading it today altogether, and I looked up and I'm going to order organic chickpeas because I know from the readings that the organic chickpea is still pretty clean, and it's not that expensive, and I can afford to buy a kilo of chickpeas paying $1 or $2 more than buying this one after having seen this result. And last is the issue of lentil, and this has really got my hackles up. I was born in India, and a lot of Indians eat dal, they're basically lentils. It's a staple food along with rice. And lentils are showing 670 parts per billion per sample, and there are 9 of them. And surprisingly, all 9 of them have measurable amount of glyphosate. Not one of them had either trace amount or no amount. Every lentil had this. 100% of the samples have glyphosate and AMPA. And I again learned, I don't want to take names, but people who know that Saskatchewan and all these areas, this lentil is being grown nowadays in an industrial scale, and it is even being exported back to India. So those who like to eat lentil a lot, especially people from India, be very wary, be very aware that this lentil coming from here seems to be suspect of having a huge amount of glyphosate in my standard, 670. Now, I have seen imported lentil readings in this, which is not called lentil. The word lentil is not so much mentioned, but individual species names are mentioned, such as mung beans, which is a lentil grown in India. It's one of the staple lentils that are eaten, or moth beans, or urad beans, and so on. And the ones that I come across, they have no glyphosate at all, and they're coming from India, or they are grown in organic fashion in North America. So I am ordering now. After reading this, I already told my wife that the store-bought lentils, green lentils and red lentils, without giving the specific species name, and grown in Canada and USA, just dump it. We have more than a couple of kilos of it, just dump it. After seeing this, I don't want to eat it. Dump it, and I'm ordering 4 or 5 kilos of organic same stuff, and they are zero glyphosate. I can see that. I'm going to change the way, either we'll have less dal, but I'm not going to have this stuff anymore. Not only that, because Indians like to eat this one as a staple food, I am not going to eat any dish cooked in my friends and any other Indian people, friends, or in the restaurants and anywhere that has dal mentioned, D-double-A-L or D-A-L, which is the Indian name for this kind of lentils, unless they can prove to me that they are buying only organic. Otherwise, forget it. At 670, it is not only gone through the roof, it has gone through the stratosphere. Now, that brings me back to the question of wheat. Only 9 are tested so far, and all of them are organic. And I shudder to think what would happen when I come across my first sample of wheat that is not organic and just ordinary wheat. I suspect that will be past the stratosphere. It will be probably into the universe, somewhere out there near Moon or Mars or somewhere. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed, and I will keep on checking more. But for the time being, that's all I have. And this data is also downloadable by you by going to my blog and clicking the right link, and you can download it and keep it. And do visit the blog time to time to get a more updated version, because I got only 200 samples transcribed, and there are 7,000 plus. I don't know how many. I have not counted the whole thing. 7,000 or 8,000. How many are there? So a lot more to go. And lastly, I am not a nutritionist. I am not a biologist, and I am not a scientist. I am just an engineer. I'm extremely worried about glyphosate. I don't need any scientist or his corporate representative or lobbyist or trolls or experts and blah 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 to tell me that glyphosate at these levels are still safe or not safe. I am not interested in their opinion. I don't even have 1 second to listen to all these goons. I have made up my own decision as a free citizen of a free country that I do not like glyphosate. I do not think the science is honest, and I do not have enough reason to change my opinion. So I have decided by myself that I do not want to eat glyphosate. I was frustrated to no end because I could not find out how much glyphosate is in which kind of food. And here I am now beginning to see one problem with the samples is that CFIA has removed the brand name of the foods. Some of them are processed food, their brand names are missing. So although you know that some of these samples are having glyphosate, you don't know which one is having how much. And when they say this one is having 67, which brand is it? It doesn't say. So that is why I was trying to initiate a parallel effort by people pushing their municipal governments, which is covered in a new petition that I'm linking here, pushing their municipal government to start testing local food, including and putting the results out for the public to see, including their brand names, so that there's no escape. If so-and-so, brand ABC of wheat or bread, or so-and-so package of rice or wheat or what have you, processed food, this is having this much glyphosate. So people know this brand is having this much. Either I'm okay with it or I'm not okay with it. I can make a decision. This can happen without changing any law, without asking Ottawa to do anything. Just leaning on our municipal governments to asking them to set aside a budget, a couple of $100 or $1,000 a month, and start testing food now and start making the data available. Check up what the other municipalities are testing and don't duplicate it, so you can spread your money better, and so on. And this is an effort that we need to get into, and just signing a petition won't do. We have to show our faces. We have to go in numbers to our municipal councillors and demand that they do it. Otherwise, we are going to vote them out of their office. So this is another level of effort, grassroots activity effort. If you are interested, you can please participate and help us. But in the meantime, take it down, take a look, and deal with it as you will, and wait for the next one. Thank you, and over and out.